All right, Victor from Worldwide is here, and we got kind of a bit of a series going on, starting today with 10 things that Victor wish every single reefer knew. Been doing this for how long?
Over 20 years now.
Yeah, this is somebody that we should all listen to, including myself. So starting with number one, what do you wish everybody knew?
Don't overlight your tank.
Okay, so what does overlight your tank mean?
Overlight your tank means that don't give 100% of what your light is giving you. Light nowadays has got very advanced, I would say, very strong. So therefore, just don't go give it everything you got. Back in the days, people used to tell you, hey, you have to overlight your tank, tons of flow. It's not the case. Equipment has gotten very good lately, you know?
So that's an interesting one coming from the 1500 has like 40 radians on it, right? So there is a difference between overlighting, meaning lots of forms of light or fill light, versus just too high a par. And I think what we're getting at here is don't shoot for 1,000 par. Right?
Yeah, don't shoot for 1,000 par, and just especially being a new reefer, you need to understand how light works parallel with nutrients, you know?
So, but if we can get par, one of the things that I wish I could really get across is that when you have a single light that puts out a lot of par, it can be beneficial to like a 1-inch frag. Yeah. But what works then and what works when it's a big, huge colony is different. And like that's why you see
when they grow.
Network of so many lights above a lot of the tanks that you're setting up.
Yeah, and the angle that we put them in too.
Aiming them right
in the very front, yeah.
Yeah. So don't overlight the tank because you're probably going to bleach them. And it's hard because you just bought an expensive light and you want to get all of the horsepower out of it.
Yeah, and then you get discouraged and then you want to get out of the hobby because your corals are not doing good. So don't overlight your tank.
Yeah. So just for reference, for all of you, you guys have probably heard this before, but it all started with our experiments with Worldwide. 200 to 350 par was almost everything we found in all of your tanks. Yes. With Dana Riddle did a bunch of experiments. We found that there. We tested here. This seems to be the sweet spot for SPS, and the same thing for LPS corals. Generally speaking, 50 to 150 par.
Yes, you're right. It seems like most corals can fall in the range between 50 and 300, I think. You need to find what's going to make them happy.
It's hard. It's really hard to know. Like more is always better, right? It's not true.
No,
it feels
not in this case. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. You would think, hey, light. The more light, the better. Because when you look at the ocean, it's so bright with the sun, but that doesn't mean you can deliver the same amount of. I mean, what's got to be the par in the ocean? I don't know what it is. It's got to be up there.
Well, the ocean has different elements too. It has like extreme flow, tides and rifts and like
extreme food.
Just so much food and flow. And one of the main reasons that corals bleach is actually that there's too much light driving too much photosynthesis, and then there ends up being all of these free oxidants in the coral that's actually poisoning it. And what it does is it expels all of its zooxanthellae to stop itself from poisoning itself in like a last-ditch effort.
Then we'll have a bleached coral.
Yeah, but in our tanks, we just don't have the same flow because the flow is actually helping get rid of all of those oxidants, all the things that the coral doesn't need. Well, it helps it keep the things it does.
Yes.
So we don't have that in the ocean. And also in one of Dana's experiments we saw, he found that he put a tool up there, a PAM fluorometer, and it measures the rate of photosynthesis in the coral.
Oh, wow.
And he actually found that it is producing the fastest rates of photosynthesis in the morning and the evening. And during the day, it's actually just protecting itself from the sun.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so it actually is optimized around that same kind of area of 300 par that you would see in the morning and the evening, not midday when the most energy is coming in. The most energy, it's actually trying to protect itself from that.
Wow.
So I wish everybody knew also that overlighting your tank, and when I say 50 to 150, it doesn't mean go try to find 150 because that's better.
Yeah.
It's a range in there, and there's a lot of corals. Actually, Than from Tidal Gardens, I watched one of his videos on Blastos. And basically, he says, dude, put the Blasto in the dark.
Yeah. They don't like a lot of light.
I did that, and then they thrive, they multiply.
Interesting.
And when I didn't do that, they barely hang on.
When you go diving, you see some corals actually growing on the underside of the rock, facing down, no light.
There's all kinds of corals in here that are just completely shattered, and I can't believe staying alive.
I just looked at the can behind us. It's overgrown like crazy. I can't believe it.
All right, number 2, things you wish every reefers knew.
Don't do zero nutrients.
That's an evolving conversation that ebbs and flows back and forth.
Yes.
But what does that mean to you? Why not 0-0?
Same thing I was saying earlier. Back in the days, when you go back 10, 20 years ago, you talk to a fish store, you talk to a reefer, you read a book, you read a magazine. First thing they tell you is you got to have no nitrates, no phosphates. And what we come to find out is that if you want the corals to grow faster and thrive better and have better colors, you need to have some readings on nitrates. We prefer to have them 10 to 20 and a small reading of phosphates. We've seen great results with that.
So the 0-0 for me comes from two things. One, back when I started this a million years ago, everybody was fighting algae. Right?
Yes,
it was
it's
like
true.
we were dumping GFO in the tanks like buckets, right? And trying to strip all the nutrients out to starve the algae off. It was just like what people did back then. Also, every pristine ocean reef is 0 nitrate, 0 phosphate.
Yes.
However, they're not 0 nitrogen and phosphorus, which is actually what we're after, because there's so much prey in the ocean that we don't have in our tanks.
Yeah, it's true. It's so much. It's a natural environment. You can't compare the two. We got a little box here, you know.
Yeah, all filled with plankton, bacteria, little microcrustaceans. It's eating things all day long.
Ecosystem, you know.
Yeah, waste, all kinds of stuff that's happening in there. It's getting nitrogen and phosphorus from capturing prey, even though it's not available as dissolved nitrate and phosphate in the water. So as we try to emulate these things, we have to understand that in many cases, we're not emulating a natural reef. We're emulating a successful artificial ecosystem.
Yes, you're right. You're right about that. It's not easy to try to mimic the entire thing, you know. We're just trying to do the best that we can with what we have.
It is a little bit different. All right, next one. Things you wish reefers knew. Number 3.
Don't change multiple things at once.
It's hard.
Yes, what happens is you go see a successful aquarium, and the first thing you start asking questions, and someone tell you, hey, what do you do to the tank? Well, I do water changes every 2 weeks. Well, I do mine once a week. You go changing every 2 weeks. That's fine to do one change, but the problem is we do more than one change at once, and then we don't know what's working or what's not. And just thinking by changing something, things are going to be better. It doesn't work that way usually.
You know, another thing real closely related to that is document the changes, right? And this one boggles the mind. Well, actually, via like a video. Take a picture of with your phone, like where these things are, because we have experiments that we run here in the lab all the time that I walk in there and, versus last week, it doesn't really look that much different to the eye. Like my memory just isn't perfect the way that I can emulate exactly the way it looked a week ago and the way it looks today. However, if I take a couple of pictures of them and I scroll through, I'm like, wow, this is actually transformative.
Yes.
And so that actually happened for the first time when you guys told us that you use amino acids. And I just wasn't an amino acid user. I just didn't get it. That seemed unnecessary.
Got you.
And then we did the experiments.
And you were like, whoa.
But in real time, no. In real time, we're watching it week to week. You're like, I don't know, it kind of looks better, I guess. And when we actually did the video, though, and you watch it go through, like, wow, man, that was transformative. Like all the colors come out, all the tissue gets puffier. Those corals are so much healthier when you can take 8 weeks of visual observations and put them down into a little thing.
Exactly. You took the time to see, but many people change the salt, and then a week later they change the lighting schedule, and then they change the fish load. And then how are you going to know what really changed things? So good, like you were saying earlier, you took 8 weeks to see the results, and then you guys saw the difference. But yeah, don't change too many things at once, multiple things at once.
There's one thing actually in there. Like I've always wanted to do this, I haven't. Like you go look at like Red Sea's coral colors, or KZ has certain things that says bring out the blues, brings out the yellows.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I've always wanted to like use those things and then document it, right? And I say this to do this at home too. Like if you're going to go through the process of buying a $30 bottle of something, decide whether or not it's of value to you.
Yeah.
And actually the most tragic thing would be is if I started using it and it brought out the color I wanted, but I just didn't like see it in real time, then I stopped using it, right? So if you take those photos, change just the one thing, not do water changes, start adding all this trace elements and stuff all at once, because you'll never know what happened. But then document it, and you'll probably be able to see whether this is a waste of your time and money or actually getting the results that you're looking for in a variety of different manners.
Exactly.
All right, number 4, wish every reefer knew.
More about parasites. a lot of reefers, they know there's parasites out there, but when you know what you're looking for, then it makes it easier to fight it or to understand what is it that you're dealing with. It's just knowing just your basic parasites: asterinas, aptasias, manjanos, acropoidin flatworms, flatworms also planaria, euphilia flatworms,
Mm-hmm.
red bugs, black bugs, zoantha eating nudibranchs,
Mm-hmm.
montiporin nudibranchs. Once you understand what these things do and what they look like, it's a lot easier to fight them. So I wish a lot of new reefers knew what they were looking at. So if you happen to walk into a fish store and you see the parasites is already in the coral, you might save yourself from buying the coral from that specific place, and you might save yourself some time, money, and effort by just understanding what these parasites look like and what is it that they do and what is the coral looks like after the parasite has been around.
Well, and you don't know what you don't know until you know it. Meaning, like, once I got this thing in the tank, it's there for good, unless you're going to be just really drastic efforts.
Yeah, and some are so much harder than others to fight them against your corals and stuff like that. But like you were saying earlier, just it's much better if you try to do it on the front end, that you're loaded with them and you have this huge uphill battle in front of you.
So that I think is actually going to be the key to a lot of people, because a lot of people just aren't going to notice the nudibranchs on your zoanthids until they're everywhere. You're just not going to notice the flatworms on your acros until you're losing acros.
Yeah, until they're starting to turn brown. And
yeah, you don't fight aptasia until, like, if you saw one, a lot of people won't fight it, and so then all of a sudden they'll fight it when there's 10,000 of them.
that's funny you say that. I just set up a pico tank a few months back, and I found 3 aptasias so far. And every time I find it, I go immediately. I drop what I'm doing, because it could be the last one. You have to eradicate them out of there, but you can't just think, oh, there's one, there's going to be more. No, you have to put on the fight early on.
So in that spirit, like, if I could just accept that there's likely going to be flatworms introduced to this tank, unless I go through heroic methods to avoid them. When I say flatworms, I mean anything from planaria all the way up to something more aggressive,
there's many different types.
Acro eating one flatworms.
Yes.
But if I just accept that there's a decent chance it's going to get in there, I'm going to do things to prevent them from getting in there. But I'm also just going to throw in a Halichoris wrasse or a 6-line, little amine bastards.
Yes.
Or a yellow chorus wrasse in there, and we're just going to hunt them down all day long.
And then we'll keep them at bay.
You may never even know you have them.
Yeah, and the best part, a lot of people, I have walked into a customer's house. He's been in the hobby for 20 years, and he wants to show me his beautiful aquaporas. And when I walked in there, half of them look beautiful, and the other ones I can see there's bite marks everywhere. So I asked the wife for a turkey baster from the kitchen. And thank God he was very fish advocate, so he had a bunch of wrasses. So when I start blowing in the tank, you see the flatworms just blowing everywhere. And he was in awe. He couldn't believe what I was seeing. But it was immediate. Like, all the wrasses were just rushing. And then in the next few days, I start talking to him, and he told me that he's doing it daily. And the wrasses are literally, they see the turkey baster. As soon as he touches the water, and they're literally next to the turkey baster, thinking the food is coming out of the turkey baster. It's not. It's coming out of the acroporas when they're blowing them. But it was cool to see that the customer's been in the hobby for 20 years. He had no idea. He was showing me his beautiful acros, just to know that he had a bunch of acropoidin flatworms, and he ended up eradicating them. But then I want to say maybe 2 years later, he started putting more acros. He grabbed them again. And till today, he's been living with them.
This tank.
I believe it.
Yeah. We got acro eating flatworms, same thing here. You're blowing them off. You see tons of them off the bases. And the only thing that we did is add a couple of wrasses that eats them.
And keeps them at bay.
Yep. We blow them off every now and then. And we use some of that KZ's, like flatworm stop. Nobody really knows exactly how it works, but it definitely, it worked at Jen's fish store locally. It works for her as well. It's believed that it makes the tissue like either denser or less palatable. Like, they're not going to starve to death. they're just not going to want to eat it as much.
Interesting. And that product came out a few years ago. I was reading it when it first came out, like 3 years ago, something like that.
It's actually been a while. It's just like hit a new level of popularity.
They were talking about it like 3 years ago. It's a product from Germany, right?
Yeah, and so just a couple of things that we do now to manage, because that tank actually has mono-Eden nudibranchs in it. It has Aptasia in it. It has
and it's thriving.
It has like all these things. It's had dinos at times, you know.
See, many people they find flyworms in their tank, and guess what? The first thing they do, they take all the aquapores out, they go dipping them. You're gonna kill them.
Mm-hmm.
You better start blowing, see how bad of an infestation you have, you know, and then you make your second decision. But the first thing to do is not to get everything out and start dipping everything.
Okay, dude. Just a little one additive, a couple of fish, and a turkey baster every now and then. If that's the solution, zero chance I'm pulling out all of the coral and destabilizing it to go dip them all. And what is it, like the heartworm medicine? What is it that kills off the flatworms? I forget.
That it kills them for good?
Mm-hmm. The treatment for it.
Like Bayer, you mean?
Oh, well, Bayer is like a dip for it, right?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, they're hard to beat, especially the eggs. One of the best things you could do to avoid them is actually never use the base. Just clip off fresh tissue if you got eggs.
Yeah, it's a tough fight. But anyhow, like we were saying, just you need to understand your parasites as a new reefer. If not, you can go backwards real quick.
I could give you a couple of pieces of advice. Get an Aptasia eating file fish before you ever add any coral.
Yes.
Get a like a Halichorus or a yellow chorus wrasse or even a little bean 6-line before you add any coral. Get some tangs to eat the parasites with pest algae.
Get different type of tanks because they eat different type of algae. You know, they wait for algae.
Mm-hmm.
Nasals are known for eating it. You know, so you always got to pick a couple. Make sure you get a couple different ones.
Yeah, like the Zebrasomas just eating hair algae all day. The bristletooths just scraping the sides of rock.
Exactly.
Even eat slime off of it. The foxface, like bubble algae, but really almost anything.
Yeah, he eats the water algae too, which is nasty.
Yeah, so think about all the parasites that can end up in the tank. Put some predators in the beginning, and you may not ever even see them.
Yes.
All right, number 5.
Number 5.
What we wish every reefer knew.
The difference between wild and aquaculture corals.
I don't think this is appreciated at all. It's like largely thought of as a ecological thing, like you're saving the reefs, and not thought of as why is it better for me? So why is it?
So couple things that before I answer that there's a couple things. We have for those of you guys that don't know, you have a maricultural coral, which is farmed in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got a wild coral that it comes straight from the ocean. Mm-hmm. Then we have a wild coral that most fish stores, they chop and they let it heal for 2 to 4 weeks, which is called an acclimated coral.
Yep.
And then you got a true aquaculture coral, which is a coral many generations, no different than you guys see from behind us, me grabbing a coral from the bird nest or one of those aquaporas back there. They've been alive for many, many years. That's a true aquaculture coral. Many people being new into the hobby, they walk into a fish store and they see instant gratification into buying a big piece of coral. They don't want to buy the small frag, but a lot of times they don't tend to realize that the big coral is a wild coral, and the chances of that coral surviving are a lot slimmer than an aquaculture coral. Mm-hmm. An aquaculture coral, if it's done correctly, should survive 9, 10 out of 10 times, you know?
Well, so that's important. Like if you got an aquaculture coral, it is grown under often artificial light, artificial flow, artificial seawater.
For many generations.
And it came, in this case, came from Florida, and it shipped right to your house. Right?
Yes.
Came plucked out of where it lives and moved to your house immediately. Whereas a wild colony, was plucked out of Australia, went to a holding facility, shipped to LA.
And we don't know what the coral is going to want.
No, it's totally different. You have no idea what the power range or depth it was collected from.
How the depth, the light, the temperature.
It's not that the wild corals aren't going to survive. It's just, I actually think of ORA corals. We call them around here bulletproof. These corals have grown in a aquaculture facility.
For 20 years.
Yeah, like this 20, 50 times generation, right? If you kill these corals, it's because there's poison in your tank.
Yeah, then you got to get out of the hobby. Just kidding.
But yeah, so the aquaculture coral, man, is healthier, but also I think way lower chance of all those parasites we're just talking about.
Way, way lower. That's why it's important, like we were saying earlier, when you walk into your fish store, it's important to understand what parasites look like. And it's important also to understand what an aquaculture coral looks like. Don't be afraid to walk into your fish store. If you see they have a beautiful display tank and you see a healthy coral, ask them if they were willing to frag a piece out of that coral. A lot of times it's better if you can frag something out of a display tank versus something that is just sitting with all the other wild corals. Because you can have an aquaculture coral sitting with wild corals, and those parasites from the wild corals can jump into the aquaculture coral. So
I got like a kind of a downer thing to share too.
What you got?
So mariculture seems like one of those things that is a middle ground. Like I could actually usually get, instead of a big wild colony, I could get like a medium-sized colony in mariculture, and it's
for an
cheap.
affordable price.
Yeah, it's cheap because they just plugged it out and put it under the sun and water. There's no electricity or anything like that involved, right? Okay, there's two things that makes a mariculture coral a little different for me. One is it's still grown in a natural environment to some degree, so it's not going to have the same survivability rates. And two, I talked to another coral wholesaler the other day, and they told me that they have the worst problem with parasites on mariculture because they're not on a natural reef. And so a natural reef, all those parasites
they get picked by all the animals in the reef.
They're filled with wrasses and stuff that are eating them all day long. Well, these things are just floating in trays out in the middle of nowhere. They don't have the same things to defend off all those parasites.
Very funny you say that. If you talk to these people, these farmers overseas that they do all these mariculture corals, they get these corals out of the water once a week and they're scraping the algae out of it.
Because there's
with like metal brushes and the rock, they're scraping the algae off of it. Exactly, because they're not in the reef and the animals are not there. So
there's no snails or tangs or anything.
People don't think of all of those things, you know?
It is different. So aquaculture, like, you know, I love and adore the fact that we're not taking anything out of the ocean, and there's no reason to, especially with something like acros. There's almost no reason to collect acros out of the ocean.
Kind of like clownfish,
anymore.
same thing. Why they still put clownfish?
I mean, you can grow these things so easy in an artificial environment. I can even do it in greenhouses if you want to be energy conserve energy. And on top of that, like, it's just going to do better in your tank, which means it's going to keep the color that you bought and grow into it'll look like the coral that you bought, the mother colony. Might not when it's a tiny little frag.
And it will shape better too. It will grow based on the shape of the aquarium too, the tiny frag.
You know, one of the things I didn't really catch when I visited your facility like a couple months ago, I mean, the thing is like radions and vortex as far as the eye can see.
The entire facility.
And like the first thing I thought of is like, oh, the Ecotech team, man, like sure marketed this well. But reality is like throughout the whole thing is this stuff is actually grown under the artificial lights and artificial flow that reefers actually use, right? Okay, so if I'm using that type of light at home, I'm going to pluck that thing out, I'm going to put it in a bag, it's going to ship overnight, zero transport, I'm going to put it under the exact same light that it came from.
Yeah, so it's going to have pretty much, if let's say you were to use the same salt and you use very similar parameters to our same light, the coral shouldn't notice much of a difference.
Dramatic thing from traveling around the world. All right, so number 6, wish every reefer knew.
Fish behavior.
Okay, I'm dying to know what you mean here because I've been learning a little bit about this from Elliot lately, but
so fish behavior is a lot of time people just want to get the fish that they like, and they need to understand that which fish get along with which fish and in what order you have to put them. Usually the most aggressive ones, you want to put them last. When you talk about tanks, you don't want to put one, you want to put them in sets of 3. If you put one, it will be aggressive towards you. If you put 2, there's a good chance that after 3 to 6 months, one turns into the other one just to become more dominant. So that's what I mean by fish behavior, is just understanding how fish get along and how aggressive they're going to be towards each other, you know?
So I've found...
So you don't waste your money.
I read this in a book. I can't remember which one it was, but basically you can identify which ones are going to fight based on what they eat and where they live, their habitat. So if they both eat algae, they're probably going to fight. If they both live in the same size like cave, they're probably going to fight over the habitat. If they both like live in an anemone, the clownfish, like we had them fight over that. When I put a ton of anemones in there, nobody cared. There was plenty of habitat. They stopped fighting.
There you go. So understanding the fish behavior. If you have a tank like yours behind here, how big is this tank?
160.
160. I think you can get away with one pair of clowns, maybe pushing it 2 pairs if you were to put them on opposite end of the tank.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting ready to put 5 pairs into our 1,200-gallon lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
It's over 100 square feet of surface.
Mm-hmm.
That's understanding the fish behavior. They're not going to fight because they're going to feel like they're in different parts of the reef.
Well, so the way we approached the clown harem when we put 30 of them in a 120, right? And that tick was successful for 5 years. You know, like they grew from little teeny babies into a full-on harem. And the only thing we did was address water quality due to the fact we're going to feed the hell out of this thing. But we addressed both habitat and food aggression, which meant there was auto feeders on there. There was feeding like by the hour. These guys were fat, they were happy, there was no reason to fight over food. There was also 8 million anemones in this thing, which meant that like nobody had prime habitat or cared.
Gotcha.
And they never fought. I mean, they did fight with each other, but nobody ever killed each other, right? And I've been told you can't have 3. We were having 30, you know?
That's why even you said the feeding part. If we have a lot of tanks into our 1,500-gallon at the store, if we do 2 full sheets in the morning and 2 full sheets at night. If we skip any of the morning or the night, you can see how cranky they are. They're literally just chasing each other and showing each other the, what is it called? The
little spine.
Yeah, little spine. You feed them and they're just swimming next to each other, like if they're dancing. But the minute you skip one meal, they're just like, they're swimming like this. They're jerky. It's like they're upset. You can tell they're moody.
So when the auto feeder like would run out,
Same thing.
It actually was if you messed up the rhythm at all. So if they were used to getting it every hour,
that's what I was saying. The rhythm.
Cared. Yeah, but if you switched it to every other hour, any change in the availability of food or habitat would cause aggression.
Yes, because like I was saying earlier, we were giving them 2 sheets in the morning, 2 sheets in the afternoon. If you miss one feeding, they get upset. But the fish are huge. So it's not like they're hungry or they don't have nutrients. It's just they need to have their meals on time.
They're ornery. You know, I'm going to add one in here that I wish everyone knew that's related to this because I just learned this recently. Is we've all seen acclimation boxes and you like put your fish in there and let it sit in there for an hour or 2 or whatever, right? Okay, not only do they work, but what I started doing now at Elliot's behest, because he sends me these fish and I don't want to kill them, is an isolation box, which is a bigger version of a acclimation box, which is isolation means it's designed to live in there for the next 2 weeks, right?
With the rest, but no one can touch them. And
yep, they all get used to each other's smells and their existence in there. And there's all of these fish that either would have been super skittish, like the Morris Idol and the copper band that he sent me.
Skittish, yeah,
they're very skittish. Looks great. Yeah, they've been in there months now and they look great and they're happy and they're healthy, but they weren't stressed out immediately because we put them in this box for weeks and we made sure they were feeding, they had access to food and energy. Okay, but also like your tangs and stuff, the things that would go in there, they would absolutely turn into an immediate aggression fest. If I put that fish in that isolation box and let them live in there for 2 weeks beforehand, and then I let them go, they go out and the other ones don't even pay attention to it. It's like it's been in there forever.
Yeah, they don't know that there was a separation.
Yeah.
They don't know.
So isolation box, if there's one thing I wish everybody knew is...
That is huge.
And they don't know, nobody sells these things, by the way. They sell isolation boxes that are this big, but a tang can't live in there for the next 3 weeks. Right?
You don't carry them?
No, like I have to, even for myself, I have to make them. So, I mean, I go to Home Depot and cut apart acrylic sheets to get something big that fits in my tank. There should be a better option for this because it's the only way that to add fish. It's like, I have seen so many fish die when you just put them in there and hope for the best.
I agree.
0. I'm telling you, ever since I started doing this, not a single aggression death after I use the isolation box.
It's a great tip.
All right. Next one here is number 7. Wish we knew every reefer knew.
How to feed your reef. So let's talk a little bit about food. What I mean by that, for some reason, I've been doing this for a long time, and every time I talk to customers on the sales floor, when I happen to be on the sales floor, we start talking about food, and they all seem to feed 1 time a day, a big chunk of food once a day. And I'm very against that. I'm a big believer that if you can grab the same amount of food and split it on 4, 5, 6 times per day in smaller amounts, you're gonna get better results. Why is that? There's more food available throughout the whole day. Then when you don't feed such a large amount all at once, the food is not going down your overflow. It's not going down into the holes in the rocks. And therefore, when you do it slowly in smaller amounts, all the food gets consumed.
I think of this two ways. It's food for fish and food for coral, right? So on the top level for fish, you're feeding more frequently smaller amounts of food. You're right. They're going to catch more of it because they're going after it more aggressively in that format. But also, when you think about how to feed, this is the part that, like, I wish every reefer knew, and I wish we could change this mentality sooner. It will get changed. I just wish it could happen faster, which is, high protein, high fat freshwater shrimp is not the only solution for every animal.
It drives me crazy how people don't. It should be some of that. Algae every single day needs to be on the tank. It's so important.
Find a way, because so many of these fish are herbivorous fish, man. They eat. If you go look at yellow tang, it might stumble upon some pods or amphipods or maybe tiny shrimp or something, but all day long it's really eating algae.
Yes.
Right?
Herbivores, they're the cows of the ocean. I always say that.
Okay, so to give you insight into that, when Elliot sent me the Moorish idol and the copper band, I'm like, damn it, don't send me that. I don't want to kill it, right? Like, I just don't need fish that have a high likelihood of dying. And he's like, look, man, there's only two pieces of this. Sourcing them healthy to begin with, and then feeding them the right diet. It's not magic. And just got to stop feeding everything high fat, high protein shrimp. That is not their natural diet. It's the number one killer of these things is actually constipation.
Give them the right diet.
Yeah. Super high fibrous diet keeps them regular, and they don't die, man. And I got to tell you, if somebody didn't tell me that these things were super hard to keep, because I haven't tried to keep either one of these things in the past, because expert only, when it's really just feed the thing the right food and get a healthy one to begin with.
Yeah. I was talking to you earlier. You told me you never seen people feed romaine lettuce to the tanks. A lot of people do that out there. It drives me crazy. Please don't do that.
It's like
buy some seaweed, guys. It's what they want. You don't see romaine lettuce in the ocean because the fish eat it doesn't mean it's the right diet. They're no different than what Ryan was saying. Don't keep on feeding them a high protein diet all day long when these fish need an herbivore diet.
And there's different grades of it. Like, I could go in there and put my hand in there every day and put in the nori and stuff. In my case, with the idol and the copper band, or the idol, all I'm doing is feeding the little seaweed extreme pellets.
Okay.
They're like 70-ish% seaweed in them.
Gotcha.
Just getting a high fibrous diet. I throw it in there a few times a day, like taking your lead, which is I don't just feed it once. Anytime I think about it, I just throw a little bit in there.
Makes such a difference. Just keep providing food. If you're there, why not?
Yep. How to feed. Think about your auto feeders. In fact, actually, this is one of the things we were talking about earlier too. Is, I wish we could dumb this down and make it a little easier. Right? It says, instead of saying fish food on it, it says tangs and herbivores. Meaning it's like all algae, right?
Yeah.
And the next one says anthias and planktivorous fish, or fish that like to eat, anthia for the most part, or the most common ones anyway, only eat teeny little plankton.
Plankton.
Yeah, so
Tiny
instead of calling it calanus, let's call it anthia food. Right? And there's lots of other organisms that will eat that. Even things like sand sifting fish. So sand sifting fish it's looking for tiny little organisms in the sand. It's not looking for whole mysis shrimp.
Yeah.
Right? Will it gum that thing down? I think of a little 4-wheel signal gobies, right? It is the saddest thing ever to see one of those things try to gum down a mysis shrimp. It's like chewing it, and it kind of spits it out and chews it or whatever. But if I just sprayed a little bit of calanus on the sand, it just goes, and eventually it's just eating it right out of my my dropper. So try to think about what this thing actually eats and then emulate it, because just using high fat, high protein diet,
it's not gonna cut it.
They'll keep it alive for a while, but not if it's so drastically different than its normal digestive tract.
Yeah, and the people don't realize it because they're eating it, you think it's working, they have no other source of food. So of course they're gonna eat it, they're starving.
I mean, that is the standard is, I haven't killed it yet, seems to be the measurement of success, and it's not.
No.
Even when they say it, it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, because to be honest, like I could live off of a high-fat, high-protein diet of McDonald's for decades.
But
It
we're
wouldn't
not
look
gonna
good.
too good.
It would not be pretty, but you can survive off of that, and people do all the time. It's just not what I'm actually looking for.
True.
Yeah. In this case, though, many animals, like the like the anthias, probably starving to death. People say you can't keep them, but the reality is they're probably starving to death because you're not feeding them frequently enough, and you're not feeding them the types of diets.
And they need 3 to 4 times food a day.
Yeah.
Usually anthias.
Next, number 8.
Number 8, importance of testing. What and why?
Okay, so what are you going to test, and why are you going to test it? Because I got such loose advice for myself when I started. It was either test everything all the time, or, oh, that's just a big waste of time. Don't test any of it. But the answer is neither.
So in the beginning, when I first set up a tank, when there's not a lot of overload, a lot of coral, I like to always check for my salinity.
Mm-hmm.
Nitrates every week, every 2 weeks, phosphates maybe once a week. And then I will say maybe after month 2 or 3, once you start adding corals, you can start checking for calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium.
So the one thing about salinity is important is as the salinity goes up and down, everything goes up and down.
Yep.
So higher salinity actually means higher calcium, magnesium, alkalinity, all trace elements. Lower salinity means lower calcium. It means everything goes up and down. So if you get salinity right, it'll be the starting point for everything else.
Yeah.
Right. For nutrients, like most people will start testing nutrients and fades off, right? Like somebody told you to do it and then you didn't know really what to do with it.
Yeah, exactly.
This is my own guidance on it, which is test it however frequently you want. But the goal here is that it's not just perpetually rising.
Yeah,
right?
You're not seeing a trend going up.
Yeah, I mean, because
my up, down, but it's staying within.
If you test every single time you test and it's higher than last time, well, this has a bad trajectory. Yeah, it's going to go somewhere bad.
All the way up.
So if it's continually rising, one of 2 things needs to happen. One, you need to up your filtration game. Start doing water changes more frequently. Change out your filter socks. Up your skimmer game, whatever it is. Or evaluate whether or not you're feeding too much and too frequently. And that's kind of the opposite of what we just said. But sometimes you might be throwing fistfuls in like constantly. And if only you did is half a fistful constantly, well, that's half the nutrients.
Yes.
Like it can be that easy. I think about it actually all the time, but you don't really think about it. Like if I had, if I dosed 20 pellets a day or, those little pellets, if I dosed 16, I've actually reduced the nutrient load 20%, and the fish would never know, man. Yeah.
I tell that to people all the time. If your nitrates are 100, you got a 100-gallon tank, whatever percentage, if you change 50 gallons, guess what's going to happen? 50 gallons of 0, 50 gallons of 100, you're going to meet in the middle,
That actually drives me crazy all the time when people
It's
say,
so
like, go
simple.
do a 20% water change, you'll solve your problem. Like, no, 80% of whatever was bad is still there.
That's what I'm saying. I tell people that all the time. It's a simple math. If you change 100% of the water, now you got no nitrates. You change 50, you're going to meet in the middle.
Yeah. It's finding a goal. Find out kind of where you want to be. And it's probably not a specific goal. Like nobody knows the magic number. But like I would suggest that not 0 in the beginning for nitrate and phosphate. But also probably not 25 parts per million and 1 part per million phosphate later on. But this is actually an interesting one. You've noticed that like nitrates help you with some color,
Big time.
but still control phosphates.
Yes.
So why control one of those nutrients over the other one?
I just noticed that phosphates, the minute they creep up, you can tell on the reef right away. The corals will turn a little brown. As you can start seeing algae growing right away. With nitrates, it's a little bit different. That's what I just noticed.
You know what? One of the local fish store here owners shared with me that as soon as phosphate gets too high, the euphyllia start popping heads.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I never heard that.
Popping heads.
Yeah, the heads of the euphyllia just like
let go.
Let go. Yeah.
Oh, let go. I thought you said popping heads like extra babies. I'm like,
oh no, they let go and they die. Right? They start peeling off. And so like. There's a lot of anecdotes, but I tend to listen to the people that do this for a living because they have the most experience.
Yeah.
If you touch 10,000 corals a month, it's different than
chances
my
are
one
you
tank.
know what you're doing. Yeah.
You start to see the differences between all of this stuff. You know, one thing that in testing, what and why changed for me is on this tank. This tank took off and did so much better when we started testing alkalinity every day.
Oh,
Right?
you at the shop, we test for alkalinity, I want to say almost every day.
Yeah, because that's the thing that changes. And a lot of people don't know this,
A
but
lot.
there's 7 times as much calcium in the tank as alkalinity, which means that when alkalinity drops, it's really impactful. There's much less of it there.
It's fast.
Yeah, calcium, calcium drops 10%. There's still a lot of it in the water. It's not like it's going to have to scavenge as hard to find it. But when alkalinity drops, man, you could drop 1.5 points and all of a sudden, man, you could see it. The corals are not doing well.
Stuff goes bad real quick.
Yeah, like a single, when you're testing too, what you're really testing in some ways is your equipment, because your doser could stop dosing and you wouldn't know it. The little tube got pinched and stuck together, or it's not getting power.
That Neptune controller.
Well,
Seriously.
yeah. I mean, you got you get that like real time thing from the Trident, right? Like it's telling you, in this case, like by the hour, not as much by the hour, but a few times a day even.
Yeah.
And better yet, I can actually see it on a graph, you know, like over how it's done over the last month or so.
You can save you a lot of headaches.
Now, yes, it's like $600, but outside of that, just the checker, right? The checker, like I can check my alkalinity with a handed checker in 60 seconds. It's dump 10 milliliters of water in there, dump the reagent, 10 swings, hit the button, tells me what I'm reading. That is like barely even a test. When you were like doing that little titrator thing, it took so much time and you're trying to read it and whatever. But that handed checker thing is so simple, So whatever you do, it changed the trajectory. Now, do I test it every single day now? No, but this tank is, it was built in 2015. It's really stable, and we can also see it better. Like we know this tank so well, you can see, the different things that happen. But we also haven't tried it on it. But like we're not actually going up and doing it every single day. All right, what's the next one here? Number 9.
Sizing the tank to your actual desires.
Okay, so people get this wrong all the time, and I wish Reefers actually knew this too, which is like the tendency is actually to go as big as humanly possible in many cases.
It's always the idea.
Okay, so let's be honest. If you were going to put a tank in your own home now, what size would it be?
My personal opinion or any person?
No, just for you, man. Size it to you.
100 to 200, somewhere around that range.
I mean, you got a business to run. You have a life to run. And so sometimes these things take over. Like my own tank,
it's a lot of work.
I put in a 360, which is going to be an SPS tank.
How long that last?
Yeah, with 3 kids, it did not last long. It wasn't the right balance of time, right? But building a new one, right? This one's going to be 500 gallons, but it's going to be fish only in this case. It's a totally different journey I haven't gone down. But this is manageable to my life. And it's big and I like it. But if I was going to do reef tanks, and I might actually still do reef tanks, it's actually going to be something different. I don't need a 500-gallon display for acros in it, or even
not with the 3 kids.
Well, even beyond the kids. Like, let's just say I had infinite time, right? Well, man, it takes forever, dude, to fill out a 500-gallon tank with tiny little 1-inch frags.
Yep.
I mean, you have to be happy that this tank is not going to look like much for a long time. However, in the E170, when we built that out with little teeny frags, in a single year, that thing was overflowed with coral, right?
Yeah.
And just because, a 6-inch frag in a 500-gallon tank looks like nothing. Yeah. A 6-inch colony inside of a smaller tank looks like something.
A lot bigger.
Okay. Also, something that I'm getting more and more excited about is instead of doing all these mixed tanks of like everything known to man all clustered together, like in my own house, I think I would like a bunch of like 60-gallon tanks that are all plumbed to the same sump because I don't want to manage all the equipment on a bunch of different ones. But this tank, only Goniopora. This tank, only Elviopora. This tank, only Euphilia.
But why? Why you want to do just one species? It's going to look boring after a while.
For me, I like the contrast. Like, I didn't know how many different Gonis there are until you put them next to each other.
So many. We got 50 different types, easy.
And so when I see them next to each other, it was like, wow, man. It's the collection of all of it. And that is what excites me today, right? So, like, think about it for a while when you're selecting your tank, man, because I wish every reefer knew that they sit and think about where do you get the joy, how much time do you really have, and then size your tank to that rather than just, chasing the like 500-gallon plus club dragon.
Yes, true. Not easy.
All right. Another thing you didn't wish you know, number 10.
How complicated sand can be.
It's true.
It's very true. So many of you guys know that we've been always fans of bare bottom. And since we opened the new store, a lot of people don't like bare bottom tanks. They like it when they see them fully set up. But there's something about sand. So we set up maybe 3 or 4 display tanks in the new store with sand. And it's been a struggle to keep the sand looking how you want it to look. Mm-hmm. When it's beautiful and it's all even, it's the most beautiful thing you will ever see. But the maintenance and some of the issues that you encounter, it can be pretty challenging. Have you experienced that?
Oh, yeah.
Talk to me about it.
Oh, yeah, man.
I want to hear it.
I can hear both. Like, there's no question. It's a little bit more difficult journey to set up a bare bottom tank.
On the beginning.
In the beginning, it'll be, especially with dry rock, it will be a different journey. But once you're there,
so much easier.
Okay, there's a couple of things, though, I found is easier. One is it's not the tank's toilet at the bottom of the tank collecting up all of the garbage that's in the sand. That's just it. Anybody wants to debate that, you don't need to. Go stir up the corner in your side and watch all the brown come out, right? We know exactly what's happening. But
don't do it. You might crash your tank.
Don't do that. With the bare bottom, though, one of the coolest things is when we use, especially the vortex, because they're cordless, big old cord going on the bottom, is if you put those things on the bottom, man, I'm shooting water across the bottom now, right?
You're moving the entire
keeping
tank.
all the stuff suspended, not just to get it down the overflow where the filtration will remove it, but also because the corals are going to capture that detritus. It's the prey. It's where we're getting that nitrogen and phosphorus from for the coral. So, like, when you can do the bare bottom and take the time to do it, like from a care perspective of the tank, no question, more stable, easier to care for, higher success rate tank. Don't care. I love sand. All that stuff I just said in my own tank, I just like the look of sand in the tank.
I do too. It's just when it's clean. I've been where we have had diatoms in sand, fighting it for 2-3 months. No matter what we do, it just keeps coming back. And
so my experience is sand looks great if you clean it all the time. Right? And if you clean it all the time, also, it doesn't become like a big time bomb in the tank. But do you want to clean it all the time?
But I notice when you clean it all the time, too, it never does what it's supposed to do, which is supposed to stay clean on its own.
Yep, it doesn't. You're destabilizing.
Yeah, right? So it's like then you have to do it almost every day.
Okay, also, there are lots of things like sand sifting stars and snails. And
they work okay. You need too many of them.
Yeah, well, and like the problem is a lot of them can't, like putting a sand sifting fish in there day one is a death sentence to the fish. Yeah,
because it's got no nutrients.
It doesn't have any, and you're gonna have to like spray food into the sand, which means you're just like creating a new problem in the sand. So they're kind of at odds with each other, and I think you have to, if you're gonna have sand in it, you're gonna have to be okay with sometimes there's some patches there that don't look perfect.
And what I've been using lately has been carbon reactor media from Julian Sprung.
Okay.
It's been working great. I like it on the bottom.
There's always, we're always chasing something with the sand, but there's no question. And when you say how complicated sand can be, it becomes a big sink for all the nutrients in the tank. If you clean it too often, it's a destabilization in the tank.
Yeah, it becomes extra work.
If you don't ever clean it and a pump falls off and sprays at the bottom, it's going to be a time bomb in the tank. So, like,
you know about that.
Oh, yeah. Sand is just a big problem that also done right looks beautiful. It is the conundrum. There will never be a 100% satisfactory answer other than, for sure, bare bottom tank is easier in the long run and more stable.
One last one. So we put in this thicker sand from Reef Sea into our tanks. Mm-hmm. And after 6 months, it's growing coralline. So the floor is starting to look purple. So it's kind of cool. You see white, and then on the top layer, you see the coralline growing on the sand because it's thicker,
So
which is cool.
I wanted to use that with the big chunky black Carib Sea at one point in time, the like volcanic stuff, and then somebody told me, he's like, "Hey, dude, it just turns purple."
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, if it doesn't move, it's gonna turn purple.
Yeah.
So people talk about like creating a faux sand bed and like gluing sand down. Like, doesn't work, man. It just turns purple. So yeah, but it can have an interesting mix when you put like that kind of crushed coral, bigger stuff in there. It comes to life in a different manner.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Also, number 11, things you wish every reefer knew.
Nothing good happens fast.
Good or bad.
Yeah, nothing good happens or bad. So most people when they first set up a tank, being brand new to reefing, the first thing that we do is we're so excited about the hobby that we want to rush everything. Usually, I don't know if you guys know, but in Europe, I think the tanks cycle 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, patience.
Kudos to you in Europe, guys. America here, we cycle tanks. I tell people 8 weeks, but I see people they cycle them for 2 to 4 weeks. They don't wait long enough. The problem with that is they're new to the hobby. We tell them what to do. They come back 2 weeks after the tank is set up. They give us a sample of water to test.
Mm-hmm.
First thing we check for is ammonia, nitrous. Once the ammonia is gone, we say, okay, your tank is cycled. You can put some things. They forget about the sum and they start loading the tank so fast, and they don't understand that the tank was ready just to load up a few items and not just to fully load it. And that's what we mean by nothing good happens fast. In this hobby, you have to take your time. You have to wait. There's nothing you can do against that.
There's a flip side to this too. This was counsel that was given to me, which is if it took you 3 months to create this problem, don't assume that you're going to use a hammer solution to solve it in a single week. The best solutions actually come from 3 months to get out of that problem, right? And so like if you had a bunch of algae or dinos or diatoms and like you're throwing poisons at the tank and you're just like stripping all the nutrients out, going from 2 parts per million phosphate, stripping it all the way down to 0.0, you're just creating all kinds of other problems in the tank. So if it took you 3 months to get there, it's probably going to take at least a month to get out, and it's going to take a bunch of things instead of just like one big hammer, gigantic, like a destabilization event. You're going to have to probably manually remove it, add some predators in there, and maybe not starve the tank of nutrients, but also don't fuel it with tons and tons of nutrients.
So don't rush things, basically. So if it takes you time to get up there, it's going to take you the same time to fix it.
All right. I added one of my own here in the end.
What is it?
Which is... I wish every reefer knew more about dips. And I'll be honest, we're working on this behind the scenes.
What do you mean by that? Talk to me.
Okay, so dips, to me, historically have been things like the tea tree oils and the clove oils and stuff like Coral RX. And, you dip it in there and you watch a bunch of flatworms and stuff
Come
fall
on,
off,
just shake it.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh.
And like there's some debate as whether it's killing it or is it just irritating it to the fact that it falls off. Eventually it'll die in there. Okay, but there's also other dips and like to a purpose. Like, so for instance, hydrogen peroxide, that dip will get all the algae off.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
And I can tell you under a microscope, I watched it before my eyes dissolve a flatworm.
Like
it just melts it, right? Okay, so the hydrogen peroxide, getting rid of all of the algae on there. And I don't use the word all very often. In this case, like I don't see algae regrow on this that wasn't already in the tank.
Wow.
And so, and we did it actually here on, it was 3 different types of corals at a couple of different concentrations, from 30% hydrogen peroxide all the way up to just 100% hydrogen peroxide.
Wow.
And we did it with acans, we did it with Euphyllia, and we did it with zoanthids.
Mm-hmm.
And I fully expected, especially Euphyllia, to just die from the 100%. Not one. None of them died. Yeah, I was
from the 100%.
100%. Yeah, 2 minutes.
Wow.
And there's more to be learned there, so don't go run off and do that with every coral you have yet. But
100%.
like,
I'm going to try that.
We're going to find out because, like, I don't want to add bryopsis to the tank. I don't want to add bubble algae to the tank. I don't want to add all these funky chrysophytes and golden brown algae to the tank. I'd rather eliminate it. Now, there's another dip, though. Like, there are the antiseptic dips, like the iodines, right? So people use that stuff on euphyllia, right?
It works
Because,
great, old school.
yeah, you don't want the brown jellies and stuff in your tank. And there's some debate as to whether or not the brown jelly is actually like a disease, or is the brown jelly, is there like a actual like a micro crustacean or type of pod in there that's actually eating it, and the jelly is actually just a secondary infection that comes from that.
Oh.
Nobody really knows exactly where it's coming from, but things like the hydrogen peroxide, which is also an antiseptic, can slow these things down and help eliminate either the parasite or the disease from entering the tank. One step past that, one of the things we also did with the dip, and I don't know the actual value of this yet, but we dipped the euphyllia, or actually all of them, in a dip of erythromycin from API for 24 hours, right? So if it is a bacterial problem that is going to cause the brown jelly disease, well, 24 hours inside of an antibiotic, which doesn't just slow down bacterial problems like antiseptics do, this, man, is actually going to wipe it out, right? So it's going to wipe out a lot of other things as well. But as we start to understand dips and how do we use these dips more intelligently,
Yes.
like I'm trying to get for flatworms, I'm trying to solve euphyllia problems, I am trying to get rid of bristleworms and like, or planaria.
We've been using Chemiclean for zoanthids. It works fantastic.
Yeah, I mean,
Fantastic.
so I mean, I was thinking about ChemiClean as a dip during that whole thing too. Like we use it to try to get rid of cyanobacteria, right? Well, like a bunch of these things, we'll seed that. So do we want to seed it, or can we just get rid of it to begin with?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So next thing, we got another episode coming right now. I'm going to pick it up. It is
Sure.
the secrets of coloring up acros.
Let me see what you got.
If you want to know the answer to that, that's the next episode.
See you soon.